Part 5, Question and Answer, Beyond the Task Towards a Philosophy, presented by Gene Hanks. Question 1. What if the audio description is interpreted as being too distracting?
That's really interesting because it brings up something to me that I haven't thought of before in terms of your project, but you might have a controlled environment where you're showing the animation. You may have a dedicated screen, you may be in a presentation where you're showing it, but if you post it to YouTube, then your user might have the same issue. I think that I know there's settings in NVDA, and I don't know about the other interfaces, but that would be a really good test, is just to see if the video, if the audio description, if there's any way to mute the other kinds of things. And I think you can do it if you have a no-ad channel on YouTube. That would be the simplest, but really, really interesting thing to think about.
Question 2. Do you have any examples of media you find to be indicative of global access?
That's a really good question. I don't think that I've seen something that I'm super excited about. One of the environments that was really interesting to me, that sort of is cracking open that, is teaching geometry to people who are blind. And that has to be a completely different experience, so it's not answering your question very well. One of the things that you can get, you have to buy them specially and they're very expensive, but you can get overlays for mobile devices that actually will bring Braille in real time on a device. Requires you to know Braille, which takes a lifetime to learn. Yeah, you have one?
I have an example. So we're animating these spoken word poems in my animation.
That's a perfect, yeah.
And like spoken word poems, as you can imagine, the rhythm of the poem is pretty important. And here we are going to like interrupt them with audio descriptions. Now, these poets didn't know that we were going to animate their poems, and they didn't know that we were also going to animate their poems and include a version with audio description. So they weren't writing for that.
Right.
But there's one poem that was written in visual narrative form. In other words, that poem is describing events. It's describing what's happening. Just serendipitously, this one poem was written as a visual narrative. And so we listened to that poem, and we thought, you know what? This poem doesn't need an audio description, because the poetry is doubling as the audio description. So imagine if you're a poet, and you're going to write a poem, and you think to yourself, if I want this poem to be accessible, and I can write it in a visual narrative form, then I could have one version of my poem that would be animated instead of two, because I thought of that at the beginning. I saw that design problem with my, up front, the way I thought about how I'm going to write the poem.
You opened up a really good avenue that I've not looked down, and I'm going to, is seeing how museums create experiences for people. I know, like, I think there's a heat map of Sunday afternoon on La Grande Jatte. In, of course, the Calder, we have a small version that, for audio, really interesting. I mean, again, this encompasses all of liberal arts, right? Certain things can be experienced more easily because of the way they're created, but we can't ask to have everything created that way. I want to make sure I stop because I know that you have other things to do during this time, but I'd love to hear, however peripherally about, how you're thinking about this and maybe some differences that you are incorporating just because some of this has been opened up to you, if it indeed has.
So we'll invite you to our reviews.
Yeah, and I have one planned.
We're all going to have to assess how we're doing. This is our first semester.
Yeah.
Through accessibility. And so sure we're not going to be like,
but what does it...
awesome at right out of the box. So we're going to have to go through a learning curve.
But the thing I do want, my last statement is universal design makes everything better for everybody. It's going to open you up to more creative solutions because it's going to take you down an avenue that it's not well worn for you in your brain. So, sometimes you're told by English teachers to have your work read aloud to you. If you write something, this is going to open up the same parts of your brain for different and new ways that's going to just look innovative and better to everybody. All right, I'm truly done now. Thank you. Thank you.
Credits: Videography, Ashley Kalin. Audio capture, Mike Dollar. Editing, Mallory Hygas. Narrator, Ian Middleton.